Welcome to Building Stories, the podcast where we tell honest and sometimes funny stories about construction and digital transformation. And today we're going to talk a bit about architecture as well, I think. We've got Stewart Caldwell. Michael, did you want to introduce Stewart because you know him pretty well?
Yeah, fellow Adelaidean. I've been working, I guess, somewhat alongside Stuart for many, many years.
Lost track.
Yeah, I think you introduced me to Revit. I was working for structural engineering. You were working for a structural engineering firm. Oh, no, I was working for a structural engineering firm. You're architects. You're the first guys to use Revit in South Australia. Mm-hmm. And you're banging on about getting someone to work with you. And I remember, we so Woolbridge and Gilbert at the time, it was like they're the first foray into Revit, and it was teaming up with you guys. So
yeah, wow,
that was, I mean,
it must be 15 years.
A long time ago.
It must be something like in that ballpark, but it's long enough where I no longer know how long ago it was.
But what I think it says is, Stuart, you're on the cutting edge, mate, and you have been ever since. We've worked with you bits and pieces along the way, and you're always trying to find new and better ways of doing things and pulling out cool tech and doing presentations and really an industry leader. So it's great to have you on today, mate. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. This is my first podcast, so I'm reasonably excited to be here. It's pretty cool. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So your young years, mate, were there any hints that you would want to be involved in this industry? Maybe hints that little Stuart was going to be a designer when he grew up?
Yeah, it's really weird. Like, I think about this quite a bit because people who know me for a very long time, like family and stuff, always say you're so lucky. You always you do like what you love doing. Because I said I want to be an architect since I can remember talking about work, like the kind of age where I don't longer know how young I was, like early primary school, and I actually don't know. I know now. When I said that back then, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know I'd be doing this, right? But I've got some really early memories. Actually, I attribute it all to a person, a guy, a teacher in primary school, who I don't remember who, but I remember his face, right? And I was thinking about this coming here, actually, thinking you might ask, and I was trying to recall the story best I can because it's really, like early on. But I've got this memory of I don't know, let's say being good at drawing or something. Obviously, I was enthusiastic about what I was doing, right? And this teacher said to me, he said, if you're really, really keen to figure this stuff out, I'll show you at like lunchtime, whatever it is, this thing we've got at school, a computer, because they had one, like locked in the principal's office or whatever it was.
You're showing your age now, mate.
Yeah, that's right. And there's this thing called CAD, and I'll show it to you. And I don't really remember what we did, but I remember him taking me to this computer, sitting me down, and this is outside of his time, right? And would have been my free time, and just taught me, or just showed me some stuff, right? And I think we drew a circle or something, whatever it was. Would have been pre-AutoCAD, whatever it would have been. I don't know what it was. But that just fired something up. I don't know what the relationship is, but I know it sort of gave me, that understanding that whatever I was doing at school, right, there was more than that. Like, this was like, wow, this is what I do in the class. This is more than this. And if I really work hard, I can do things that are just like awesome and fun. And I think from there, I somehow connected creative things to enjoying myself. And why not just work hard to do that? And I think that's the seed, which sprouted to here talking to you guys. Yeah. But I've always wanted to do it. Yeah.
So where's what's the interest in architecture? Coming out of school, you're like, okay, I can see this passion of, you got the tech side of things as well. We'll come back to that, but you're going to go into, okay, how do we create in this world around me? Is that where your mind's at? Where do you get this architectural drive from?
It's funny, like I kind of, the building part interests me, but it's actually maybe one of the least interesting things at times. I think what drew me to it was this idea that you can generate thoughts and out of that produce physical things. And in architecture, they'll give you money to do it. Like, I'll say, we've got X million dollars. I want to take your ideas and I want to construct them into things. I'm like, that's a great deal. I'll do that. And I was fascinated by the process behind it. And I think I like people, and I think I like the idea that architecture builds things for people. So you construct these environments, and we're humans, and you have direct influence on people. And that relationship between the space you create and their life, and I think you can just do some good. I know we're not doing good like solving, researching cancer cures and that kind of stuff, but I think you can make people's lives better, right? And I think that's why where the work we do is sort of social architecture. It's sort of schools and hospitals and healthcare and all that kind of. I think it tries to do the most good. They're not vanity projects. They're trying to contribute.
I was about to say,
environments.
mate, I think that's one of the most humble descriptions of the architectural profession that I've ever heard. The way you just described it, that was great.
There would be many who would say, I do it because it looks awesome and I like massive things that look like me. There'd be probably quite a few like that. But I think, and I think there are definitely groups within architecture. Yeah, it's a very broad space, right? And what I'd like to think is when you project those ambitions, that people are all but around you that have similar ambitions, which I think is why Mike and I clicked. I think that's probably the connectivity there is just doing something to make things generally better,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so I see now this starts to play out in the pursuit of maybe a technology that's also going to enable this even more. So one, it's like I want to be able to take a thought and put it into the universe and change the world around me. But now I want to also do it with tools. So now I guess you've got this excitement around, okay, technology is going to enable the thought to universal, out into the world around me. These tools are going to enable that.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I remember the irony to all this is I was not a non-tech, but I was a very analog person at uni. Like at uni, when I was studying architecture, there was computer labs. AutoCAD was around. People did it, and you could do digital printing. Anyway, you could definitely use that stuff. But I stepped away from that really hard. My final project was hand drafted using dots. Like I actually just physically did pixels to try and generate images, right? The absolute opposite of doing anything automated. And when I joined Practice Russell Yelland, where I am now, everyone else was using like a CAD platform, and I was the one person who couldn't do it. I didn't have any skills, and then I learned it, and then I remember John, who is now my business partner, at the time was my boss, was sniffing around for this because he's a big influence on that. He's like a front of the wave type person. Wherever the industry is moving, we're going to be at that point. And he wants to step beyond that and go into spaces that are maybe tricky or dangerous, right? And so he had, through exploration, acquired Revit, right? So it was coming into the office in these what would have been big boxes full of discs at the time, right? 6 discs or whatever the first versions came on in like an old VHS sort of holder. And I remember him going around the office sort of saying, basically, I'm looking for someone to pick this up and do it. And on paper, I would have been the least sensible person to do that because I had the least skills. But I think I do like being challenged. I get bored very quickly, and I do like things that are complicated, like really complex puzzles. And I just saw that as this, it just clicked for me because I thought the whole drafting exercise, like two-dimensional drafting, was the stupidest idea. I didn't understand how you would think for 10 minutes and then click for 50, just try to resemble it with points and dots and then get it wrong and do it again. I'm like, this is the worst experience I've ever had, right? And so this new platform was like, well, you can think and you can like digital Play-Doh. You can kind of move things around, and it's tangible, and it has like properties which you can then also test. It was like a little science experiment, right? This sounds like it's more enjoyable, and I think deep down I love the disruption. I think this is going to really like.
Mm.
Is this a podcast PG or M? Where does it sit? It's gonna mess things up, I'll say. All right. And so that was also exciting. And so I just jumped into it with another guy, John Ainsbury, who is currently in the office, who was way more experienced than I was. But I think he also was just, he was at a different point. He was at the point where he had mastered his craft, and this was something new. And so we just jumped into it together and just sort of smashed it out, and sort of haven't turned back. It's weird. People sort of sometimes, if they see me somewhere but don't quite know my name or whatever it is, they go, "Oh yeah, the BIM guy. You're the BIM guy," right? And I still, at my core, feel like the guy doing dots on paper. I don't feel like this technical whiz that people kind of paint like that. But I also find it very easy. Like none of that stuff was challenging or complicated. It just in my brain, when you explain the whole idea of all the data sets and the computing bits, I don't know, it just sort of comes in and goes, "Oh yeah, this makes sense. I'm comfortable here." And but I've met lots of people who look at it like this. The screen is a barrier. What is behind this thing is terrifying, and it is the worst thing. And like my 2D experience, right? That Revit is like that. It's like grating against their skin, right? But for me, it's been natural, and I guess that's helped. I've just sort of picked it up, and it's funny.
That's something. It's something that comes up regularly on the podcast. Even we're finding that curiosity is what drives a lot of the the inspiration for exploring this thing or this new technology. That curiosity is really important.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and then you kind of, and I guess in those early days, Mike, I think that's why we clicked, because you needed people around you who had the same mentality, because everyone else is looking at us, looking at me, like, what are you doing? This is like, if you're the idiot in the room here, like you're on an island by yourself, right? And so you needed people who were happy just to dig into stuff and figure stuff out, Yeah. It's funny you talk about those days we were hunting for someone to work with, because very, very quickly we went from using Revit, using it well, and realized really fast, well, others have to do this, like with us, that the power is there. And that was a huge hurdle, because nobody else cared. Nobody else wanted to do it.
Which kind of brings us to our next question, I guess. What are some of the key challenges along your career journey up until now?
That one was, well, I think there's two bubbles to that. The first bubble was me. I think I was the biggest hurdle to jump. And I think for a period of time there, I'm not sure if you get caught up in all the excitement or buried in your own crap, but I sort of lost focus of the people component, behind it. A lot of it was about process and trying to figure out how does this thing disrupt what we do and all that kind of stuff, right? But at its core, people need to move with you, right? And if you can't do that, none of it mattered, right? And so I think that was a big sort of lesson learned. I tell this story a lot, actually, at like talks and lectures and that kind of stuff, when I had this, which I find life does a lot. You have a big aha win, and then as the second you have that, life slaps you in the face so hard. You think, wow, that wasn't what I thought it would be, right? Where I felt like I had this eureka moment where I had cracked the code behind trying to map our old and new, all this stuff, right? And this big unveiling at work of this process, this thing I generated, like, look at this. And no one cared. Everyone looked at me like, I don't get it. Or like, why? And he said, I'm like, yeah, that's right. I've been doing this by myself, right? I was on an island, working on an island, and it sank like a tank, right? And that was the lesson out of that exercise, was doing this alone was useless. But also then gave me the greatest challenge, which I would say exists right now, which is just trying to get everybody to sing together a little bit and move together a bit, Definitely,
When you
it's
say
people.
everybody, you mean in your company, in your consultant team, everybody in the industry?
All
What do you
those
think?
layers, Luke, and all those
Yeah.
layers, and and no matter how many plates you're spinning, one's always wobbling. You know what I mean? Like you can sort of get a few people coming, and then you're like, "Whoa, where have you gone? Where you come back?" Like, where?
Hmm.
And and that's it. But that might be common. That actually might be a bigger problem, larger than any kind of BIM or digital revolution, right? But I feel like what's been interesting to me is how we talk about people being social animals and wanting driving connection, and these tools encourage connection. Despite that, it's
Mm.
been very, very difficult because what you figure out is, yes, we're social with particular people. Not
There's
everyone
always little
gets on.
asterisks on things I'm comfortable to share or comfortable to do. Yeah.
100% right. And it's been
Mm.
the amount of meetings I've had where um, you've tried this sort of digital connection which has failed. All right, we're actually going to get together and sort this out. And everyone comes to the room armed with shields and weapons and blockades. And, then all you need is to break it down a bit. Everyone goes, oh, actually, we're all just people. We'll sort this out. And we'll do it slightly better than last time, because. Um, so that's been, just trying to constantly chip away at that, Luke.
I remember like BIM meetings being quite hostile in some of the early days.
Wow, yeah.
Is it still like that, do you think, or are we getting better?
It's definitely better, but they still pop up, but now it's a surprise. It pops up and you go, wow, geez, where have you been, man? Like, how are you still angry
When
about
you have
this
to pick up
stuff?
your sword, you forgot to
Yeah,
pick up your sword, and it's still there if
yeah,
you
yeah,
need it.
that's right. Dust it off, It's definitely better, and but there's definitely not buy-in universally that working together collaboratively is the best way forward. That is not
Hmm.
still not the common hymn sheet, right? And
Mm.
out of interest, I had again when life surprises you. I don't know if we want to drop brand names and that kind of stuff, but we're going through licensing on a certain software package which is quite large and very expensive, and we're trying to figure out how to share this with other people, right? And we work with others a lot, like a lot of consultants, people all over the place, all over South Australia. And I just called them all up and said, look, would you be happy to, this helps me, it helps you, would you be happy to pitch in, right? And I was
Mm.
surprised that half the people said no.
Right.
And I don't know why I was surprised. In hindsight, I go, okay, I guess if someone called me up looking for money for something that they already do, I'd say maybe no. But I
Mm.
kind of
But they
thought,
were getting the benefit, but they doesn't mean they were ready to kind of bear the burden. Yeah.
yeah, that's right, I guess. And that was sort of
Mm.
interesting to me that, because, but the reasoning was that with the way we work is unusual, apparently, where you work together with people and aim for good outcomes and all that kind of stuff, work collaboratively, share information. Apparently, we're the weird ones in industry, or there's not many of them around. So they said, well, who else is doing it? Is only with you and a couple of others, and that's it. So I don't see the value in that. And so it was just that was an interesting process. But having said that, the ones that said yes have really kind of galvanized things. You know what I mean? Like there's sort of everyone
Welded the
kind of
supply chain together. These are
jumped
the
into a
guys you
bit of
want
a
to stay with.
pool. Yeah, that's right. And now
Mm.
things just move, man. They're just fluid. And so I don't know. Like it's as another interesting exercise. Just when you think things are like X, that you said the asterisk.
Mm.
No, it's not. It's not quite like that. It's over here. you know? Yeah, yeah,
What are you personally most proud of in your working career to date? So put your humility aside for a second.
yeah.
You got a
That's
project that
challenging.
stands out?
People after that quite a bit, and I
Yeah.
uh, or on a project, you must be happy now. Like you walk around a project, and you must be happy with this. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not. This is the worst bit. Like, and because you see the issues and stuff, and I want the next thing. I'm sort of already invested in whatever's coming after, right?
Okay.
So I reckon in terms of pride, like project wise, I've got nightmares as opposed to achievements, right? But I think for a while now I've actually abandoned the idea of me producing some sort of piece of architecture which I say, wow, look at that, right? I want others to kind of my mission is to get others to feel like that you go and do this awesome stuff and feel great, and when you feel great, I've won, right? But I think
You're still being humble, mate. You're still being humble.
Yeah.
Well, if I am gonna be proud about something, I think about you guys would know Tal in our office. Yeah, this digital engineer, right? So I forget. I think it was 2 years ago now, maybe 3 years ago. I was approached by somebody, through this community. You do these type of things. You meet someone, blah blah blah. Someone from SA Water, they were doing this apprenticeship program, and he pitched it to me, and I'm like, architecture apprenticeships, like employing
Okay.
people without skills, like this all sounds like nutbag territory, right? And it was a risk to jump into something where I had no idea. The qualification was fabricated, like the skill set was unknown. An apprentice with a brand new skill, how would it fit in? But taking that risk and jumping into that, and just then allowing him to say, oh, you're going to just take us in a direction which is unpredictable, and I have no control over that. And sort of running with that has been just one of the best things. It felt like being able to let go of that and run with that kind of exposure, a very kind of raw sort of environment, and be comfortable with it.
Do you think
For
that
me,
speaks back to people not necessarily betting on you early in your career, and you're like, I'm going to bet on someone, give them a chance? Is that something that's going on there?
point. I haven't sort of thought of it that way, actually. I think what's different is, I think deep down, I know one of my weaknesses is letting go of things, like that lack of control, like that kind of controlling things makes you just feel more comfortable, right? But you just can't do it. It's complete bollocks. You think you can actually manage these outputs, right? So just getting comfortable with that, and this was a big jump to get comfortable with that. And I think for me, like as a director, that took me the position of director at a business took me a while to get comfortable with as a thing. People look up to you now, and I'm like, why? Special skills. I didn't quite see it, or whatever it was, right? But this was like a strategic direction. I'm going to take the business here, and then we're going to risk something on it, and we're going to sort of try and make this work. And I think it has been very successful. It's produced some amazing outcomes. So that, to me, Luke, I guess, which is maybe it's not really project based, but it's something. If you're going to ask what I'm proud of it, I'm proud of it.
That's where you're saying the challenge or the wrestle has been to bring people along the journey. I think that's you're proud of when that has succeeded, which is cool. Yeah.
And I guess I would also say, getting back to architecture, in the last, say, 5 years, I think we're producing some really, really good work. So I think giving staff or finding people, trying to give them opportunity to do great stuff and the freedom to take those risks, do it, and then get it constructed, and everyone be happy. I think they're big wins, and there's probably a few of those over the last few years. These projects we look back and go, actually, that's really nice. Like, we're really happy with that, and we can celebrate it, and the client's happy, and everyone's happy. I think that's been good, despite all the compromises and things that come with projects and all the challenges around business and everything else. All that kind of stuff happen at the same time. Being able to still pull that off is a good win. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's interested in working in this space, in architecture or design or construction? They might be just coming out of high school or something. What are you going to tell them?
You have to love it. Two things. You got to love it, and you cannot let fear get in the way of anything you do. Like, you cannot let other people's perception, opinions, or anything dictate your directions. Because that fear of that is by far the biggest roadblock I see with anybody who's struggling to move forward or wondering what to do next. It's got nothing to do with the person's ability. It's all just the concern over the perception about if this fails or whatever it is, right? It's that. And I think they're connected, because I think if you've got passion and drive for it, you won't care, right? So you got to have both. You got to love that thing, and then you've got to move forward, irrespective of being afraid about it. Yeah, because our profession is unusual. It's very, very few people who really understand what we do. It's a very strange job, right? And I've never had anybody articulate back to me what I do for a job. They've had a go at it. I'm like, whoa, that's way off. No idea what I do, and that's okay, right? And also, we work in a profession where what you do goes into the public realm for critique. You build stuff that gets put on display, and everybody will have an opinion. And I'll tell you,
And
98% of them are
polarizing
negative.
as well. Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Like, for every pat on the back, there's 400. Like, why did you do this, right? And if you do your job well, no one should celebrate it. You'd be like, yeah, well, no way, it worked out great. Yeah, that's why we paid you. That's your job, to make this work out well, right? So, yeah, I think, fear. You got to detach from that. You can't care about other people's opinions of you, and you have to be able to love what you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially as a lead consultant, often you're going to have to take all of that. You've got to bring the whole team along. And if there's too much of that negativity, just get to you.
Yeah, it can really be sort of crushing. I've been in so many rooms where, like you said, Mike, there's clients, consultants, all around the table, and something you'll say, guaranteed half the room don't like you. Like half the room are happy, the other half are like, what are you doing, right? And so you've got to, I don't know, you've got to live in that space all the time, and that's okay.
Yeah,
because
going back to what you started with, you've got to bring this thing to life. It's new; it hasn't existed before. Right now, it's a thought in your mind, and you've got to bring an entire team along with that thought. You've got to really love what you do, and you've got to not be afraid.
Exactly right. Yeah, because despite all the negativity, that passion's got to sit in here. Like despite all the roadblocks and the sorry I can't or whatever it is, like that's okay. This will work out, right? Because it doesn't matter if you don't like it or if you don't want to do it. This will work out. We will find that way through it, irrespective of all the roadblocks, right? And then, having said all that, when it doesn't work out and it does fail, is that okay? Well, like you said, Mark, we're doing new things. Failure is inevitable. I mean, I kind of tell people that a lot. If you're going to work in a space that has risk and experimentation, it is inevitable you will fail. Because failure is context driven. Like, person A will think you're a winner. Person B will think you're a failure. Failure is inevitable. So if you accept that and you stop caring about it, the downside is, which you talk about humility, Luke, is you also can't care about the wins. You can't take one and not the other. You can't say, I don't care when I fail, but I'm going to jump up and down when I succeed. No, you can't do either. You've got to say, well, when I win, I'll feel good about it, but I don't expect celebration and pats in the back. And when I fail, I don't care if you are upset or don't like that, but this is what has happened and we will figure this out. You're going to be able to absorb both. And I think that's actually a challenge I see. People want the accolades and the pats on the back, and then don't want to get told you suck at something.
Yes. Yeah. So then we sometimes get a bit real now, and we ask, what mistakes would you share for others to avoid? So we just talked about fear of failure, but you can avoid things if someone tells you, actually, I tried that, it didn't work. So what mistakes would you share, mate?
Oh, well, there's the big ones. The big ones are assuming others care like you. That if you have that personal drive and love, thinking that others think that is a big deal. It can really be confronting when they don't, right? And don't share that passion and drive. And so that's something I've been guilty of a number of times, really. And I think, I hope I practice it now, humility. I'll tell you a story, slightly redacted to remove, projects and specifics, but it is by far the biggest wake-up call of my career, right? And it was a project which was a significant project at the time for me. I was a young architect. I think I was registered. I think I was doing that kind of stuff. It was a pretty big project, and high risk for the client and for us, quite stressful, and a bit of profile about it. And anyway, I remember we're a good part of the way through the project. It's under construction, but it's kind of, like you can sort of see the end, but still lots to go. And I remember sitting at my desk, and I remember working away at something, this spreadsheet, which I had built, right? And I realized, that moment where you go, wow, I've made a mistake, and it's a big one, and you get that feeling like in your gut, like, wow, this is bad, right? And I had made an error which had been recurring for months, to this huge financial error, and the client was going to be up for a lot of money. I don't mean 10 grand. There's probably 4 or 5 digits at least, right? I'm like, wow, this is really bad, right? I got out of my desk and I went around to what was my boss at the time. He's now retired, and I just explained the problem. I said, look, I've made this mistake, and I said it in a way expecting him to say, don't worry, I'll fix it, right? Don't, you're okay. And he did not say that. He said, well, you're going to have to figure this out and explain this and dig out of it, right? And I walked away thinking, oh boy, I did not expect that. Right? I thought I was looking for a life raft, and he didn't throw me under the bus, but he definitely made me work to fix it, right? And so anyway, I figured out what I'd done, and we went to this meeting, a big one. It was like a special once-off to sort this out. And I remember walking into this room full of old, important people. This big, long boardroom. And I sat at the short end, and there's all these dudes looking at me, and my boss sitting next to me. And I just sort of explained what I'd done, how we'd got here, in a lot of detail, what we're going to try and do to fix it, and this is what we did. And they said, okay, we get it. That sucks. That's it. And we walked out. And I was like, man, I thought I was going to get crucified in there, right? But no, it was just, I think they were all wise enough to know that people make mistakes. The failure is inevitable, but we didn't shirk from it. We put the effort in. We worked to justify it, or we couldn't fix it. The mistake had been made. It wasn't about rectifying it. It was about sort of putting your hand up and being sort of honest about it. And so the trust was still there. You know what I mean? I think we still maintained that despite the mistake. So yeah, that was a big mistake, but a huge lesson learned that, when that happens, you just got to dig in and put the work in and be honest. And because I guess at the same time, we'd walked out of that room and we got fired, right? Like the mistake had been made, but my approach hopefully would have been the same. But walking into that room, I had done the work, prepared to be honest and talk about it. Their reaction was their reaction, and I could not control that. All I could control was the reaction that I could do to whatever I had done. And fortunately, it worked out fine, but it may not have. But that kind of taught me that I couldn't control that outcome. I can't manage that. All I can manage is what I can do. So, but yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
But don't do that, people. Check your spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Excel is not error-proof.
I think that comes, like the way you've just described that story, it comes back to one of the earlier things that you're talking about is we're all people. And we've got processes, we've got tools, we've got projects that we're all working on. But if we're not doing it as people in a room together, what maybe inevitably got you out of that in the end was the fact that we're all people sitting around this table, and we've got flaws and we're going to fail on some things. And if we're not honest enough and I don't know, sit at that table in some states we're going to find ourselves vulnerable. We have to be human. We have to be people present on projects to work together and work through failures and work through wins. It's kind of like what you're saying.
And I think what I know now, being older, this was a while ago. This was maybe 20 years ago. Being older now, that in life you just the older you get, the mistakes get bigger, or harder. Or not mistakes, but life throws you things. You think, wow, what I thought was hard. No, now this is hard. You know what I mean?
The stakes are higher,
is exhausted, or this is stressed. Right? They are different metrics. And I guess in the room, what I now know is all those people being maybe slightly what with the age I am now, they'd all seen some shit. And so what I was explaining, yes, this is the mistake, but there is way worse than this. And I think that's, but it goes to your point, Mike, about, that people are people, and people, in life, things happen. You can't predict that or know what people are doing, which is why that empathy is so important. And I think we're just lucky that the people in the room had that empathy. They all sort of understood that. I have been in rooms where people don't have that, and they are genuine asshole people, and they kind of, they react with, chest beating and anger. But I think that's just them processing stuff. That's how they kind of deal with that. Thankfully, not too many of them. They have been the minority, which is nice.
Yeah, one of the other things I wanted to pick up on, Stuart, was the fact you've shared so much of your story with the community. So, one, you've brought along your organisation, but you've brought along the consulting teams on projects around you, but you've also been able to share a lot. And we go back to Revit User Group back in the early days. That went on to Build SA and BIM SA, and all of these other extracurricular activities are all about sharing your story, sharing other people's story, and people coming together to work on problems that we have as an industry, challenges that we're going to have. It's about people sharing, their failures or their wins. Is there anything else you want to talk about regarding kind of us all getting together in a lot of those kind of environments that you've been instrumental in setting up, like the Revit user groups and the Build SA?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I reckon that sharing is just pivotal. Like, just because if you accept values in people, right, then sharing is just simple. Because the stuff I'm giving you, that's not the value. It's the fact that I can do it, right? And that's what I hope maybe people see sometimes, is because I'm a pretty transparent person. I'm going to inform them and make their life better. That's a good outcome, isn't it? Right? I think the strange thing is, like, over my life, I think I have been actually quite naive to things at times, though, where people will have to point things out to me, like, "See, Stuart, you should go do that because you're not getting the hints, right? Just go do this." And one of them, that back in the day, that Rug SA thing, right? I reckon I forget what it was. It was early days. We're sitting around the table, and Toby, remember Toby Maple was in the room, and he'd come over for something. I forget what it was, and he just said to me, he said, "Stuart, you should, this group should be running better than this. You should just take it and run it," right? I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know, maybe one day. And he said, "And you talk pretty well. You should go present at this thing we're doing over in what would have been one of those early Revit type conferences, the maybe RTC back in the day, one of the early ones, maybe the second or third one." And I was like, wow. And this thing, I'm like, I never thought I would ever do that or could ever do that, right? Anyway, so eventually I said yes, and this will get somewhere in a minute. I drove over there. I had to fly, then I had to drive to this place, and I rocked up, and it was all very exciting. And I was doing something on SketchUp, I think, right? And I remember walking in the hotel to the room to do my presentation, and just instantly I was terrified. It just dawned on me that I'm going to present to a bunch of experts. What am I doing? Like, I'm not an expert on this. Like I don't belong here. All that kind of self-doubt was there. And I walked into the room, and I thought I was going to die. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would punch through my chest alien style and drop on the floor. And I was so nervous, so incredibly nervous, right? And I'm sitting there on the verge of having an aneurysm or passing out. And I think the guy next to me could obviously sense I was coping very well. And he just said something very simple. He goes, "We're all sitting here because we just want to hear what you've got to say. It's that simple. We're all rocked up. Obviously we care. You just got to say it and we'll listen to it." I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess so." I didn't have to be the best. They just came to listen to whatever I had to say. So that's what I did, and it actually went really well. Told a couple of jokes. I think the highlight was the jokes, not maybe the SketchUp stuff. But that kind of that stuck with me. That you don't have to be the expert in the room to speak up. You don't have to be the best. You're just going to be willing to do it. And 99 times out of 100, someone wants to hear that. Because if anything, it helps them do it, right? Just that you're just sort of like lubricating the conversation. Sometimes all you've got to do is facilitate. And then the amount of times, like, I will present something, but what I'm saying is not the most profound thing of the day. Someone in the audience who asks that question or says something, goes, "Man, you know more than me, right? You should be up here." Mm-hmm. But I think I've just got skills in encouraging that person to share that thing, and that's the value right there, right? So yeah, I think that's the key, is that people are terrified of being wrong. I'm not the best. Like, I'm not the person to bring this together. But you don't need to be. You just need to be the person that brings it together. And sometimes you've got to force it. Like connect the Lego bits, like, so they click like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So Stuart, we're really curious to find out what you're thinking about in the future. What's coming up next for you, and what are you excited about? What changes do you see on the horizon that you're really keen to work on?
Well, I feel like I've sort of been perpetually hanging around this fork in the road, right? In our profession, in architecture, and in business too. And what I can't quite figure out, I guess what excites me the most, is whether I see a gap forming between high-end experts and connectors, nodes, right? So in architecture, are you like design focused, design firm, upfront, talking to clients, and then that's it? That's all you do. You're just doing these really bespoke things. Or are you these connectors? Because our job is getting so much more complicated. There's like, I remember 10 years ago, a consultant list would be 4 people on a typical project. Now it would be 12 to 15 by default on the simplest thing, right? And so all these languages you need to speak, all these people you've got to connect to, and all these people you've got to bring together to bring on a journey, that's a skill in itself. But it's hard. I can't quite pitch where the value is going to land, right? And what fascinates me about the whole AI thing is whether it's another consultant in a team, or is it the connector, which means that skill set is gone. I kind of wonder which path it's going to take. My gut tells me that the connector is where the value is going to be, because I think the human condition is very complicated, and I feel like AI might be very good at replacing bespoke skills. You can train it to do highly technical things, which maybe used to take a person with generations of experience to develop, but now an AI can learn 100 years of experience in 5 minutes. And so it can be the expert in the room, but it can't understand that human condition, the need to just chill out sometimes, to put the swords away and talk and do this thing together. I think that might be the skill that becomes very, very valuable. And so what I hope as architects, because architects are quite good at connecting lots of people, that becomes a very valuable skill. The creative side will have influence. AI now does images and stuff like that. You can just type things, right? But you've still got to give the inputs, and that might get better over time. But I don't think what it will place, at least for the foreseeable future, until I stop caring about it, is bringing people together. So that's my thoughts, Mike, until where it's going. I think that's people being people.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because if you go back far enough, the architect was the master builder. And maybe that's kind of returning to that a little bit, where the master builder is the one that's actually facilitating a lot of the expertise on a project and bringing it all together. That's where the people aspects kind of play an even bigger role.
Well, and I think that's the biggest risk to our industry. You don't need to be an architect to do that. You don't have to be an architect to bring people together. The architecture is about buildings and the built environment and taking ideas to construction. But we have to be very careful that we don't forget that is a key part of our role, because theoretically somebody else could do that. And that's actually been my driver for all this BIM development stuff, is the fact that when you digitize things, it allows others to do that. I mean, the classic example is Apple and Kodak. Like, you digitize photography, that means you no longer need to be a photographer or in the photo industry. A telecommunications company can produce a camera to replace you. So if you digitize parts of our job, that means someone else can do it. And so you need to find a way to keep yourself sort of relevant and connected, right? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just changing track a little bit. You've spent a lot of time talking about the kind of the architecture and the consulting side of things. What about the builder? You guys have had a lot of experience working with builders, and you've probably brought a lot of builders along the journey that you've been on. How are they using some of the data and these things that you're building virtually inside of your team? How do they respond to some of the things that you're creating?
I think what I've seen a few things. One is in South Australia in particular, and Australia, I guess generally, we've seen BIM technology develop from the ground up. It's sort of a user based, then it's getting up near the business level. It hasn't really gone into governance yet. It's sneaking up into there in certain parts, right? And that means that the drivers are individuals or companies that kind of tailored around very small outcomes. So that's what I'm seeing. Builder A, we're good at this. Builder B, we're good at that. Builder C, we're good at this because these are our commercial drivers and this is what we want to do. And so there's hugely varied outputs and success stories. Like we're great at coordinating, we're great at delivering, we're great at client management, and the BIM thing, we're cherry picking the bits we want. And so it's getting better too. Like I've seen, I think every builder I know who has any kind of BIM ambition has like a BIM team and maybe even a design team now internally as part of staff to assist in that delivery. And you can see it, and the builders that come to work with us who don't have that and are working in what you'd call now quite a traditional model, like it's almost frustrating now for us to think about, like, man, we could solve this stuff in such a better way, right? Having said that, on the flip side, the builders that are really quite progressive and pushing things are really challenging us and putting us in pretty risky situations where I remember we did a job recently, quite a big project, and there are processes about shop drawings and review and all that kind of stuff, and there's approval processes and finances, but the BIM workflow just challenged all of that. And in the end, we were building these things off live models, right? And contract documents were all just like optional extras, right? And so
wow.
it worked out great due to trust and relationships and everything else, right? But that's risky. Like you wouldn't do that with anybody. You do that with people that you can work with and understand that if this all goes pear-shaped, no one's going to throw each other under the bus. We're going to figure this out together, right? And so it's funny how what I'm seeing when it works really well, everyone's engaging in a project, looking at a contract, signing the contract, throwing that in the bin, and then just working over here the way we want to work together to get it done. And that's great when you know everyone, but it's difficult and very, very difficult when it doesn't go well. So that's a real challenge for industry, and there's no way in the universe policy can keep up with that. It's already happening despite contracts and policy and insurance companies and everything else. It's already happening to get best outcomes. So that's something, I don't know where it's going to go. I think, like most things, it'll go great until someone ends up in court, and then it'll go very bad. they'll pull back and try and regulate it. Perhaps, I'm not sure, but it's a very interesting space, right? Yeah. And what's on the back of that? What I see, and I don't know if these things are related, but it's been interesting over the last few years. Like you go back pre-COVID, traditional procurement methods. COVID comes along, high risk. People pulled back and changed to like managing contractors, negotiated contracts, anything to get the job moving. Risk didn't matter anymore, right? And now after that, the pendulum has swung hard the other way. Traditional procurement models, lump sum projects, that kind of stuff, right? But having said that, there's still but I still want the best outcome. And so I'm seeing like projects where traditionally you might have 4 or 5 builders on a list. So what if we just go to 2, these 2 that we trust, right? And so that it's challenging that it says that I actually don't want the cheapest price. I want the best people for the best price, and that's it's moving a bit. And I just wonder where that's going to go, Mm-hmm. Mm. I'm not sure. How do you guys see that? I mean, you guys are kind of in the all over that space, like in different industries too. Is it moving in the same way? I know this podcast is, you're asking me questions. I'm throwing one back at you guys.
The trend that I don't know if it's controversial or not, but we've talked about it with a couple of people is to what extent will digital remain this kind of domain of wizards, and to what extent will traditional job roles, not even with digital or BIM in the title, just become, digitally enabled, like a project coordinator just does things a different way. And I wonder when that will fully happen, and maybe it takes some years from here. But yeah,
That's a
what's your
good
thoughts
point,
on that?
Luke. It's my only when you said that, my first reaction was about 6 months ago, 8 months ago. I was in the kitchen, and my daughter, who would have been 9 then, was doing homework on her desk with her laptop, and she was doing an assignment somewhere. And what she would do was think about something, say it to the laptop, who would type it, and then go to Google, ask the question, and it would talk back to her. And I'm like, that you meant to type it out. I think you meant to learn how to type. But she just said, why? I just say it and it does it. I'm like, that's the default. And she's right. And the default reaction is that. And so when that is her learning at that age, then I think part of that, I mean, that's a long time ago. I mean, it's 15, 20 years until that sort of grows up into that. But imagine the expectation that that's the default, that I say it and it does it in everything I do in my work. Then that's it, isn't it? Maybe the wizards, Luke, are these kind of they're just sort of hanging on to things until everyone grows up and can do it natively. I don't know, sort of the bearers of knowledge, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Well, you
what I
bring up
don't,
this thing about
I was saying, what I don't want to happen is I don't want there to be this thing where the people who drove the digital transformation become the ones who stop the next generation of that by
The
protecting
roadblocks.
their own. And I don't think this necessarily will happen. But yeah, that's something that I'm going to actively resist anyway.
That's a good point, Luke. You do
Mm,
see that my value becomes connected to my knowledge, and therefore I will
mm,
protect it at all costs.
mm,
Um,
mm,
yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I think about the same thing, Luke. As I do think a little bit about, so where am I bringing my value? I think I
mm,
realized a little while ago that I have to decouple myself from that knowledge. I have to cut all the threads and let it run. And at work, the result has been a little bit of chaos. It means a lot of good process work and stuff has been ditched, but it also means people are reinventing that in ways I couldn't have predicted. And so I think that attitude, but then go right back to the start. You can't do that if you're afraid of failure or concerned about the outcome. You can't do that. And so you've really got to be able to detach yourself from that fear of the consequence of the risk, which inherently says maybe you're a bit of an idiot. You should probably be a bit more worried about that. But I've had that chat with a few people. I've had a few lunches with a bunch of other directors and talking, or maybe just whinging about work and life and balance and everything else. And the number one thing is everyone kind of agreed maybe back in the day we were the ones just dumb enough to jump into the pool and take those risks, right, without worrying about the outcomes. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Well, you talk about policy and contracts, and your example with your daughter at the computer, like no policy or contract or even protocol is going to keep up with the forefront of what we're trying to do and running ahead with the new technology. It's going to really, we're accelerating so much faster than anything can keep up with.
And across multiple sectors, like you just look at finance and, Bitcoin and digitization of money and the democratization of, like of those commercial structures that are in place to, give economies of stability. It's moving forward faster than any government can match it or keep up with it. And even in that, what you think should be super safe, the world's money, no, no more, right? And so it's inevitable that you're right, Mike, that progress will move faster than policy can possibly control it. It'll be more about trying to manage its consequences, it'll sort of be on the tail as opposed to providing guidance, which is, I think that's something which I've kind of given up on a bit, is for a long time people looked to government for guidance or leadership. We want you to be the light we aim for. And I'm like, that is not happening. People are too terrified within they're going to help us not destroy the place, right? They're going to come in on the tail and provide the guidance at the back to say, maybe we should go over here a little bit, right? But I think they almost have to let the front end run, right? And try and manage it the best they can. So that idea of a beacon to aim towards, that's gone. I think we have to rely on each other a little bit to work for common good, which sounds a little rose-colored and optimistic, but I think that's the goal, Mike. That's kind of why I do what I do.
Well, I think I kind of think these super teams will just organically evolve, where we've done enough projects together. We know how we can put the contract aside and just do the best, that the project requires. And those super teams are going to work together better than other teams. And we're not going to try and introduce new people that are going to disrupt the way this team operates. And
you'd hope so. You'd hope there's faith and trust in there. And I think in places like Australia, where that population base and all that kind of relationship stuff, I think facilitates that. I wonder if other economies, if that optimism would be worthwhile. I don't know about that. I think the fact that, like, I've known you guys now for a long time, and you're both working together, kind of living apart, but we still catch up and are connected. That's I wouldn't say it's uniquely Australian, but it's definitely that you can do it here.
Yeah, cool. Well, as we kind of wrap up now, Stewart, one of the questions that we keep going back to, we've got a kind of quick fire round, and we ask a couple of silly questions here. But
all right, I'm ready.
Yeah, you're loaded. All right. So you've in your tool chest, you've got a choice of a hammer, a screwdriver, or duct tape. What are you grabbing? What's going to solve most of your problems?
Hammer. When in doubt, hit it.
Beat it.
And I think I say that because it's also my son's favourite tool in the tool shed. If he's ever bored or I see him at the back, he's found the nails in the hammer, he smacked them into something.
Awesome.
It's actually very good for frustration. We can take our frustrations out.
So a couple of times, just go and nail something.
Yeah. Your son will be telling that story in about 50 years about how he was a builder. He was using the hammer out in the backyard when he was a kid.
I hope so, Luke. But I hope he's still got all his fingers, because he's not very good with the hammer.
And as an architect, you've got a choice of materials before you. We've got concrete, steel, or timber.
It's timber.
I'm curious.
100% timber. If I was not doing this, I'd be a carpenter. I love working with wood. I used to make furniture in my shed. So it was I never had the skills or the patience to kind of do it really well. So I kind of gave up on that. But I like working with wood. So that would be my and we're trying to do an extension on our house, and I'm trying to figure out a way to have it, clad in timber. So I like that stuff.
Yeah, cool. And favorite piece of hardware tech? You got a bit of hardware tech that you're curious about or you're using?
The gizmo I like the most is my iPhone Pro with the LiDAR scanner and the little 3D capture thing. I use an app called Canvas, and that thing I love. It saved me a bunch of times. You're on site. It's not super accurate, but it's pretty damn good. And actually, it's getting better all the time. I was actually in Port Lincoln yesterday for another project, and I used it to scan an entire building, like outside, and it captured the entire thing, mapped it. I walked around, sort of waved it around. I wasn't even trying. I had to walk through garden beds, and I tripped over once. And then at the end, boom, point cloud, the entire thing, like in color, for free. It doesn't cost any money. And that is an awesome little gizmo.
I like that. That's cool. Well, Stewart, thank you so much for your time, mate. It's been really good to talk. You've shared a lot with us, your whole story back in the early days and kind of where you think things are heading. Thanks heaps for your time, mate.
Thank you very much, guys. It's been great to see you both again. I hope to see you both in a room sometime soon. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, mate.